The air was heavy with the scent of scorched metal and melted plastic, a stench that clung to the damp morning mist like a bad memory. I stood at the edge of my backyard, staring down at the blackened skeleton of my boat, the Emma Grace, named after my late wife. The 16-foot aluminum fishing boat wasn't much to look at, but it was ours, mine and Emma's. We'd spent countless evenings gliding across Willow Creek, watching the sun sink behind the cedar trees, her laughter bouncing off the water. Now, it was reduced to a charred husk. The vinyl seats melted into grotesque puddles, the hull twisted like a broken promise. The only thing left untouched was the small American flag I'd bolted to the stern, its stars and stripes dusted with soot, but still standing. A stubborn little symbol of defiance in the wreckage. I'm Henry Sullivan, a retired electrical contractor, and I've wired everything from suburban homes to city grids over 40 years. I know a fire when I see one, and this wasn't some accident. The battery cables were sliced clean, the fuel line punctured with surgical precision. Someone had set this fire, and I had a damn good idea who. It started with a letter, one of those official-looking envelopes with a window and a red stamp screaming final notice. It came from the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, a group I'd never joined. My 5 acres, bought by my grandfather in the 1950s when this part of Oregon was nothing but rolling hills and pine forests, had never been part of their manicured little empire. I built my house in 1987, long before their identical mailboxes and cul-de-sacs sprouted up across the creek. The letter demanded $950 in delinquent dues, tacking on nonsense like community beautification surcharges and compliance penalties. At the bottom, in bold, it threatened a lien on my property if I didn't pay up. I read it over coffee, set it on the counter, and ignored it. Not because I'm some cranky old man who hates rules, but because it was a scam. My deed was clean, my land free of their covenants. They were banking on me being too old or too tired to fight back. 2 days later, she showed up. A shiny black SUV rolled into my gravel driveway, and out stepped Karen Voss, the HOA president. Mid-50s, dressed in pristine yoga gear she'd clearly never sweated in. She clutched a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. I'd seen her around, barking orders about unmowed lawns or unapproved porch decorations. She marched straight to my porch, ignoring the walkway, her heels crunching on the gravel. I opened the door before she could knock. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. She didn't smile. "Henry Sullivan, I'm Karen Voss with the HOA. You've ignored our notice. You owe us $950. Her voice was sharp, like she was scolding a child. I leaned against the doorframe. "My land's not in your HOA, ma'am. Never has been." Her eyes narrowed behind her designer sunglasses. "All properties along the creek are under our charter, Mr. Sullivan. You're not exempt. Everyone pays to keep this community pristine." It was a rehearsed line, delivered with the confidence of someone used to getting her way. I shook my head. "I've got the original deed and plat maps. My property was never annexed. What you're doing is fraud." Her lips tightened, a flash of anger breaking her polished facade. "Our legal counsel says otherwise," she snapped. "Pay the fee, or we'll escalate. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." She spun around and strode back to her SUV, leaving her threat hanging in the air like smoke. 3 days later, my boat burned. I didn't call the police. I knew they'd ask for evidence I didn't have yet: witnesses, fingerprints, something concrete. Instead, I got an email from the HOA that afternoon, titled Community Safety Alert. It was a cold, corporate message about an unfortunate electrical accident involving a boat on the creek front, with a sanctimonious reminder to maintain compliant watercraft. No mention of my name, no condolences, just a veiled attempt to pin the blame on me. The audacity of it lit a fire in my gut, not rage, but something colder, sharper. They thought they could burn my memories and bully me into silence. They didn't know I'd spent decades solving problems with wire and steel, that I was a veteran who knew how to wait, plan, and strike. I started with evidence. I circled the wreckage of the Emma Grace, snapping photos of the cut cables, the accelerant-soaked char patterns, the punctured fuel line. I called the county fire inspector, reporting a fire of unknown origin. A young guy named Carter showed up, poking at the debris with a metal rod. He didn't say much, but his eyes told me he saw what I saw. Still, his official report? Undetermined cause. Classic bureaucratic dodge. I emailed the city manager with my photos and a summary of the HOA's harassment. I got an automated reply promising a response in 10 business days. Dead end. So, I turned to my neighbors, not the new ones under the HOA's thumb, but the old-timers like me. Most hadn't seen anything, but then I talked to Amos Carter, a retired fire chief who lived a few houses down. Amos, a grizzled Navy vet, had security cameras everywhere after kids kept messing with his mailbox. He invited me into his cluttered office, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee, and pulled up his footage. At 2:37 a.m. on the night of the fire, there they were. Karen Voss, her lackey Tom Reed, and a third guy I didn't recognize, standing by the creek path near my boat, their flashlights slicing through the dark. It wasn't hard proof of arson, but it was damning enough. Amos saved the clip to a flash drive. "This ain't right, Henry," he said. "We'll fix it." I emailed the HOA board, attaching the video. "Explain why you were on my property at 2:37 a.m. the night my boat burned," I wrote. Silence. 2 days of nothing. I took the clip to Councilwoman Ellis, a politician with a smile as fake as her promises. She watched the footage, her expression flickering, then handed back my tablet. "This is concerning, Mr. Sullivan, but it's a civil matter. Hire a lawyer." Another dead end. Then came the gut punch, a new HOA notice taped to my door, billing me $4,500 for emergency remediation of my hazardous boat. They'd burned my property and sent me the cleanup bill. That was the moment something in me snapped, not into rage, but into cold, methodical resolve. I walked into my study, the air heavy with the weight of Emma's absence, and said aloud, "I built this town. Time to remind them who owns it." In my old filing cabinet, buried under blueprints and contracts, I found it. A vellum envelope holding the original county land maps, utility permits, and the founding deed for the Willow Creek development. My signature was at the bottom, faded but clear. I unrolled the maps on my drafting table, comparing them to the county's online records. There was a subtle shift in the boundary line, drawn 14 years ago to swallow my creekfront strip. A digital theft, quiet and clean. I spent hours on the county recorder's website, downloading every document tied to my land. No annexation, no signatures, nothing. Their claim was a lie. Then I found an old email from 2017, sent by Jim Holt, a former HOA board member who'd been ousted by Karen's clique. "Henry, watch your back," he'd written, attaching an internal board email. In it, Karen admitted the plan. "Sullivan's parcel is a gray area. He's too old to notice. Redraw the maps and bill him. Bury him in paperwork if he fights." It was a confession, plain as day. I built a case like I'd build a power grid, meticulous, unyielding. A 3-inch binder held it all: deeds, maps, emails, photos, Amos's video, my affidavit. But I wanted more than a lawsuit. I wanted to end them. That's when I called Walter Pierce, a retired county zoning clerk I'd clashed with on big projects. He answered from Nevada, his voice as sharp as ever. "Henry Sullivan, the guy who brought his own tape measure," he said with a chuckle. I laid out the story. He listened, then said, "Your deed has an override clause. You're not just a property owner, the foundational grantor." In 1990, I'd granted utility easements for the development, making me a co-founder with veto power over major changes and the right to dissolve the HOA for misconduct. It was a kill switch, and I held it. I set the trap. I bought heavy aluminum signs: private property, no HOA access, trespassers prosecuted, and staked them around my land. I wired 2 hardline security cameras, one on my porch, one by the creek, feeding time-stamped footage to a recorder. 2 days later, Tom Reed rolled up in a golf cart with a nervous contractor in tow. Ignoring my signs, Tom marched toward my porch, babbling about a mandatory inspection. I stood my ground, phone recording, camera rolling. "You're trespassing," I said, pointing to the lens above me. "Smile." Tom froze, her bravado crumbling. She retreated without a word. I sent the footage to a local watchdog group, who replied, "We're on it." Then Karen overplayed her hand. A letter arrived, stamped with a pixelated county seal of felony forgery claiming a court order to enter my land with police. I drove to the county courthouse, boots echoing on marble, and handed the letter to Commissioner Larson, a man I'd known for years. "This is a problem," I said. He studied the seal, his face darkening. This is a felony, Henry. A stupid one. He made calls, and the system woke up. That night, Walter flew in, meeting me at a diner with a file of old records. You didn't just grant easements, he said. You're the sole grantor. The HOA's charter says you can dissolve it with one signature. The pieces were in place. The HOA called an emergency meeting to spin their narrative, but I was ready. Amos and I walked into the packed clubhouse, handing out packets of my evidence deeds, maps, emails, videos. The crowd's mood shifted as they read Karen's own words. I stood, holding my packet. Ms. Voss, care to explain this email where you plan to defraud me? I read it aloud. Gasps rippled through the room. Amos played the trespass video on a screen. Karen stammered, her control slipping. Then Larson and a deputy walked in. This is now a county matter, Larson said, taking the gavel. The DA's investigating fraud and forgery. I held up the HOA charter, highlighted clause in hand. As the foundational grantor, I dissolved this board for malfeasance. I signed the paper. The room erupted. Some cheered. One woman cried. Karen was let out, her empire in ashes. A week later, the creek was quiet. No more HOA golf carts, no more threats. The county voided all fines and liens. Karen faced charges for forgery, fraud, and more. Tom got trespass and harassment. Their slush fund was exposed. Neighbors helped me rebuild my dock, and a new voluntary cooperative formed, free of tyranny. I stood by the creek, holding the Emma Grace's warped anchor, heavy with memory. They'd tried to break me, but they'd forged a stronger community on the ashes of my wife's boat. Emma would have loved that. What would you do if someone tried to steal your home, your memories? How far would you go to protect what's yours? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories of justice served.